Right, 4th years. This would be like the 4th time or something like that I've started this, so hopefully I can get this one finished and people won't interrupt. So it's revision for your history. We want to go through a series of different topics for you to revise. So, population increase. Why the population increase in Scotland? When I'm going through this, note the detail that's been put into it. Obviously, you would you wouldn't put equal signs, you would develop it into a sentence. What I'm saying is it's not good enough simply to put people marrying younger, improved sanitation, improved hygiene as a list and say these all cause population to increase. You've got to explain each point why they cause it to increase. So people marrying younger meant there was more people had more time to have babies, so therefore that increased the population. Improved hygiene, cotton underwear replaced wool, which meant it could be washed more often, which reduced the rate of diseases or the amount of disease, which decreased the death rate, which meant population increased. Improvements in medical knowledge, i.e. smallpox vaccination meant there was less disease, decreased the death rate, which increased the population. Improved sanitation, Guy Thomas Crapper developed the flushing toilet, didn't invent it, developed it. Underground sewers, public health initiatives such as appointing the town councils appointing medical doctors to look into why disease was spreading, etc., etc., meant there was less disease, reduced death rate and increased population. Healthier diets, there's improvements in farming, which meant there was more food. There was development of the railways, which meant there was fresher food, and both of these combined to mean people were generally healthier, which reduced the death rate and increased population. And lastly here we've got improved housing conditions. Less overcrowding basically meant there was less disease because it couldn't be spread as easy, which reduced the death rate and therefore increased the population. While you're doing this, you'll obviously want to copy all this down into your own notes so that you can put it into a format you can write it over and over and over so it goes into your head. So you might want to pause it at this point so you could get all the information down, but obviously I'm just going to fire on. So next up, new technology. This is in coal mines. You should put coal mines in there. So in 1815, the Davy safety lamp, it gave lamp without the risk of explosion. In 1850, they used iron pit props instead of wood, which obviously made it safer because less chances of the mine collapsing. In 1880s, they introduced electricity, which meant there was better light to cut at the coal face, where the actual coal was, which reduced the chances of accidents. In 1913, they introduced steel pit props, again stronger than iron, reducing the chances of having a mine collapse. In 1914, dust control was introduced to lessen the damage to lungs. By 1924, 48% of the coal is machine mined. This means that they're not using a pickaxe, which in general means it's going to be safer. So, reaction to suffragettes' action. Remember, the suffragettes were the ones that were militantly campaigning for women to get their right to vote. There was a variety of opinions. We're going to go through about three. Hunger strikes. The public felt sympathy for the suffragettes, and remember the Cat and Mouse Act was the idea that if somebody went on hunger strike in prison, or a suffragette went on hunger strike in prison, they would be released until they were fit and healthy again. They'd be taken back into prison, and it was like a Cat and Mouse Act, because it was like how a cat plays with a mouse sort of thing. This brought the suffragettes quite a bit of sympathy because people didn't like to see that sort of the government to be treating members of the population like that. However, attacking MPs and throwing acid in bowling greens, etc., etc., many in the public felt that it were too far and it wasn't womanlike, and if they're behaving like this, then why should we give them the vote? You know, they're not responsible enough to be given the vote. And Emily Davidson, remember, that was the woman who chucked herself in front of the King's horse, and does she commit suicide? Was it a protest? At the time, people just felt shocked and horrified and revulsed by that action. So many in the public were horrified. So that was a negative reaction, if you want, in the newspapers. However, it is fair to say some people in the population thought that she was heroic, she was brave, etc., etc. So that gives you a little idea of the reaction to some of the suffragettes' actions that you guys should know. I've put down here, you must be able to explain how each of these points led to the First World War. And that's kind of like the same as what I was talking about the population. You must explain how each point increased population or led to the First World War. You can't just merely put it as a list. So, rivalry between the great powers in terms of who could have the biggest army, in terms of who could be the richest, who could have the most trade, etc., etc. Sowed the seeds of tension, so to speak. Tension in the Balkans, the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the rise of these new challenging countries, Bulgaria, Serbia, Austria-Hungary also then going in and taking over Bosnia, and it's right next to Serbia. The Pan-Slavism in all the countries there was lots of Slavs that lived in them, and Slavs also lived in Russia, and there was this idea that they should all be united under Russia. There's just a variety of different issues or factors or forces taking place at that time in the Balkans, which produced quite a bit of tension. There was empire building. Remember, the Kaiser said he wanted his place in the sun as well, a reference to the fact that France and Britain, all the great powers, had places in Africa and whatnot else that caused tension. The alliance system, there was two armed camps, a triple entente, Britain, France, Russia, a triple alliance. This led to obviously creating tension, but also it was like a tinderbox ready to go off. So events that in Balkans also dragged all these other great powers into the conflict. Militarism, this is in here, this idea that it's glorious to die for your country, it's glorious to go out and fight for your country, etc., etc., was quite big everywhere. The idea that the military should be the forefront of the national life. The arms race in Britain and Germany, they competed to see who could build the biggest navy. Britain had the two-power standard, where it was going to have a navy twice as big as the next two powers. They introduced the dreadnought. The Germans introduced an equivalent to it, and they were racing to see who could build the most and have the biggest navy. Well, that's the naval race. I've just explained that. Arms race is how you can have the most machine guns, who can stockpile the most ammunition, who can have the biggest armies. In Germany and in France, they both had conscription armies, this sort of thing. Austria invades Bosnia. I mentioned that in the tension in the Balkans. So in Austria, go in and station troops in Bosnia. It raises the stakes because Serbia, obviously, there's a lot of Slavs living in Bosnia, and Serbia doesn't like this, and Serbia's backed up by Russia. Russia's in the triple entente. You can see where this is going. Austria and Hungary's in the triple alliance. Sets it up perfectly. And then we have the spark that sets the whole thing off, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which draws Serbia into conflict, then draws Russia into conflict, which draws Austria-Hungary, Germany, etc., and the whole thing starts First World War. So, you must be able to describe the impact that these technology had in the front, the Western Front. Machine guns created conditions for stalemate because it meant it was very, very hard to advance. Artillery, you had, remember, two different tactics to begin with. They had the creeping barrage, where they put basically a line of shells always continually falling, say about 200 yards in front of the advancing troops, so they all move up. The problem with that is the enemy know that you're coming, so you've lost the element of surprise. Sound ranging, they developed later on. The French were good at this, is where they actually listened to find out where the machine gun posts were or where it was wanted to hit, and they actually aimed specifically for that place. It meant there was less, the troops, the people that they're firing on had less time to react, because basically they heard a shell, and then if it hit them they were dead, and if it didn't hit them then they were lucky to escape. Gas, three types: mustard, chlorine, phosgene. Were they effective? Well, they spread fear throughout the troops because of the horrible effects they had, but as we've seen, they were subjective to the wind conditions. If the wind was going your way in the morning, you let the gas off, great, but then the wind could change direction and you've gassed your own troops. The tank, it had its problems. It was slow, could be break down a lot, all the rest of it. However, at the Somme and Cambrai, these problems hindered it. However, again, it did create fear in the German troops, and later on, when they sorted out the tactics, it actually became a pretty good weapon. Planes were used to spot enemy positions and relay that back. Balloons were used to try and stop the enemy planes from being able to come over and have a look at your positions. The radio was a great advance in the first battle of the Somme. One of the key points that mucked it up, if you want, was they didn't know when to send reinforcements, when to send more attacking troops, because they just had messengers running back and forward and they could have been shot. The radio at the last battle, which the Allies fought on the Somme, they used radio signals so they could actually more accurately send troops where they were needed, etc. It meant there was more effective fighting force. And lastly here, canned food. It meant troops could go and stay up at the front line and eat out these canned foods rather than having to go back and get big meals cooked for them, etc. So, recruitment. How were people recruited? There was government propaganda posters. These ideas of, as your best boy wearing khaki, the idea of trying to persuade people to join the army is a good thing. Remember the white feathers. Women would walk up to young men in the street and give them a white feather as a sign of cowardice if they hadn't joined up. There was the PALS battalions, where people could join up as a group of friends. So if you worked at the same factory, you just could all decide, right, we'll all go and join here, we'll go and join up, and you go and fight together as well, so you wouldn't be split up. In 1916, they introduced conscription. Not straight after, but just after the Somme, people realised it's not going to be over by Christmas. It's not an easy war. If you go sign up, you're going to die. There's a good chance that you could die or get injured. So they had to introduce conscription. So Nazi policies on the Jews. On the 1st of April 1933, they boycotted the shops. 1st of April is April Fool's Day, hence the idea to remember it only. You'd be a fool to go in. The SA stood outside, not allowing people to go into Jewish shops. The 15th of September 1935, Nuremberg laws banned intermarriage. Jews lost citizenship, which meant they couldn't be defended in court. And the 9th of November 1938, Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, where the Nazis, tried to make out that it was a German public reaction to the sort of terrible them putting up with the Jews and all the rest of it. But in actual fact, it was the Nazis that had organised it. But they burned synagogues, smashed shop windows, arrested people, and some people were also murdered. In schools, Jewish teachers were banned from teaching German pupils. German children were taught that Jews were criminals and that they were responsible for starting World War I. You could also mention here that Einstein was sacked from university and many other Jewish people. Then we come on to segregation. Jews had different swimming pools, cafes. There was park benches that were painted yellow, saying Jews only. There was many no Jews signs at entrances to villages. So there's lots of stuff there you could write.